Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Chris Collier. Welcome to another show, Conquer with Chris, the podcast you don't want to miss. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Collier. Today we have Patricia on the show. Patricia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me today.
Pleasure's all mine. Is a very unique individual. She's an author and coach, trainer. She has a very special program. We'll get into that in a minute. Patricia, tell them a little bit about yourself. Patricia, if you would, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, so I do a program and I work with coaches and other entrepreneurs to help them to expand their thinking, to get them to grow their business. But a lot of it has to do with, who we are and the confidence we have and who we believe that we can be. And that came from a lot of study and watching what my son did and experiencing some of the awareness of who we can be and what we can draw into our lives.
Wow. Well, I'm sure you didn't start that way. So we weren't, because nobody starts out just being amazing, right? We have to work on it. It's just, we tend to go through things that shape us and mold us. And sometimes it keeps us from, and sometimes it pushes us towards, depending how we perceive a matter. So Patricia, tell us a little bit about how you got started and how you came into this place where you help people become amazing.
Yeah, so it didn't come easily, which I don't think anything ever does come really easily, when you're trying to be more than you think you can be. I feel like I just had kind of an ordinary upbringing, nothing spectacular. Although I never felt that I had a lot of confidence in myself, which, looking back, I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't feel that way. So I just pretty much did what most people do. Same thing every day, going to a job, working, coming home, raising kids, it's just a very ordinary life. And, I never felt like, I will take that back. I always felt like there was more to life. And I kept thinking, is this it? Just doing this routine, habitual, thing over and over again. And I was an educator, so I did have a little bit of difference with different children that I worked with. But what really happened was when my son was 12 years old, my oldest daughter was in college. My second daughter was about to go to college. And he says to me, Mom, you don't need to worry about putting me through college. Now, at first I thought, oh gosh, what's he going to do? And because I come from 3 generations of college people, so it was kind of like expected. And so this would have been the 4th generation. And he said, I'm going to get a scholarship. And I said, well, that's nice. And I said, how are you going to do that? He says, I'm going to be a collegiate athlete. I said, okay, what sport? Because he played football, basketball, and baseball at the time. And he goes, I don't know yet. So he just kept telling me this over and over again. Week after week, he'd say, I'm going to get a scholarship. And honestly, I never believed him because, first of all, you have to know the backstory. When he was born, he was immediately airlifted to a regional hospital because he had a collapsed lung. So that was how he started his life. But then beyond that, he had bowed legs, which we had to get, had to wear a brace at night to get them straightened out. And then he had 2 lazy eyes, so he had to go through eye therapy 3 different times in his life. And then when he was 9, he was diagnosed with juvenile diabetes. So he had all these health issues, going on. And, yet he wanted to be a collegiate athlete. And quite honestly, some of his sports playing was really difficult regulating his blood sugars and his insulin. But he decided it was going to be baseball. And when he decided baseball, it was like, great, because there aren't very many scholarships in baseball. So, if you're really an outstanding baseball player, you just go pro. And so it became, an issue of, all right, you just believe your little fantasy and I'll just keep saving my money for you to go to college. And so when a school was interested in him and he wanted to play in the South, so he found a school in Georgia and they started recruiting him. And we went to visit and they said, well, you could expect a third to a half. And now this was a D3 school, so they don't give athletic scholarships, they give academic scholarships. So he just kept, believing this was going to be a full scholarship. And when a scholarship letter came, he even said that. He goes, Mom, wouldn't it be funny if this is a full scholarship? And I reminded him what the school had told us, only a third to half, because I didn't want him to be disappointed in himself or to think he was disappointing us. And so when he opened that letter and it was a full scholarship, I mean, I was so excited for him. But at the same time, I was angry with me because I had done personal development pretty much my entire adult life. And I'm like, well, I never did anything like that. How did he do this? And, so it set me on my own journey. And my own journey then took me to understanding how we manifest things in our lives. And I discovered Bob Proctor, who became even a personal mentor of mine. And I started to understand the pieces of personal development I'd missed all those years because nobody had ever talked about the law of attraction and how we can build our own reality. It was all very much structured, setting a goal and going after it and so on. So that's kind of the backstory of where I help people to go because they need to understand that they create their own reality.
Wow. So much to cover there. I want to go back. I remember one time this is a long time ago, I sent my taxes into, this back when we used to mail taxes in. I was waiting for my refund. I got really mad. I got internally, it wasn't like I was furious and going to go punch something. I just got mad inside myself. I said, my return, tax return is coming back today. Because we used to get checks when we get automatic deposit because I didn't do that. I said, my tax return's coming today. And lo and behold, that day it showed up. I want to go back because he was speaking this the whole time. He was speaking, I'm going to get a full ride. I'm going to get a full scholarship. They're going to take care of me all the way. It's funny. He kept speaking it and it happened.
Right.
Most of us would have been like, I don't know. They told me there's no plausible way for this to happen. They give just the scholar part of it, not the athlete part, right? And somehow he got the whole enchilada.
Right.
I will say this in my limited experience, I would say that when you get emotionally connected to your decision, and whether it be anger or love, some people talk about the good side and the dark side, but at the end of the day, if you get some emotion tied to that and you be like, this is going to happen this way, it really forces a change,
Right.
both from paradigm shift and from what you receive. So since you're the expert on it, or more of an expert, how do you get yourself, prime yourself, if you will, to get to that place where you can connect that emotion to it so you can make that change in your life to get the results you desire?
So that often is the tricky part in working with people, is to get them to that point, because you do have to get emotionally involved in it and you have to believe. You have to so much belief. And like you said, most of us, when you hear a third to half, you're going to start accepting that. And had he accepted that, that's probably all he would have gotten. But he never accepted that. And, and things are going to go wrong. And they certainly did for him. Like the travel team he thought he needed to be on didn't take him. In fact, they were barely watching him in the tryouts, which really irritated myself because I couldn't decide. He had played for them the year before. And they said, if you do a really good job, you'll be on our summer team. And he did a really good job. And then they weren't watching him. I thought, are they not watching him because they just know he's on the team because he did such a good job? But no, they weren't watching him because they couldn't. And that's something that took me a while to figure out. If he'd have gotten on that team that he wanted to be on to travel that summer, this school that gave him the full scholarship would have never seen him.
Wow.
So he had to go to another team. And here's the funny thing. So we scrambled because by the time he found out he didn't make the team he thought he had to be on, it was February. Summer's coming. And so we were scrambling to find another team, found one. They had one opening. And their opening was for an outfielder, and that was the position my son played. I mean, that's the way the universe works. And so we went to that team. This team had a connection with this school in Georgia because we live in Pennsylvania. So this was a team in Maryland. And they had a connection with the school in Georgia where they came up to watch a camp and they saw my son. They became interested in him. And here's the funny thing. When we went to meet the coach in Georgia and talk to him, he started telling me about this guy in the outfield and that guy in the outfield, like all these players. I'm like, well, why do you want my son? Like, I couldn't figure out why he even wanted him. I'm looking back, I'm like, I'm probably the only parent who ever questioned a coach as to why they were recruiting us. And, the thing is, like, I don't know that he knew, but that's the way the scholarship could only come from that school. Yeah. And so it had to happen. And, looking back, you can connect the dots. It's like Steve Jobs says, you can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And so you can connect the dots and you see how things happened and why they had to happen in that manner. But that's what we have to do. And so often we get a disappointment or a roadblock thrown in front of us, and then we start to question everything. But what we have to realize is that those roadblocks are there because there's a better way. And if we trust that there's a better way, and it's even going to be better than you can imagine, maybe even more spectacular, then you can start trusting it.
Wow. It's so often it's true. Like we run, like the old, was it Alvendino book, Acres of Gold or Acres of Diamonds?
Acres of Diamonds. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the guy sold his property.
Yes.
To go hunt for diamonds, and he finds some, but he gets moderate success. But then he finds out that they found the biggest diamond mine in his backyard.
Right.
And it's just amazing. Sometimes, like, we give up what we have, or what we should have, for something that isn't really real. Like, it's one thing to have an imagination. It's a whole nother thing to use the imagination to create something that's not really there. It's one thing to create your own destiny, endpoint, or your goals. One of the biggest lie we get is we need something that's outside of ourselves.
Right. It's all inside.
Yeah. So the thing is like, so let's say someone's starting a business, starting a new career, starting something, and they want to reach great levels. I know we've touched on this. Your sons showed us the way, in a sense. How do you communicate? I know it's hard to attach the emotion, but how do you start out? Like, what's first bait? What's home plate? You're up at bat. You get ready to swing. What is the first steps to get this thing to start to grow?
First thing is to really clarify what it is you want. What is that burning desire that you have? And it's got to be a burning desire. As Napoleon Hill talks about in Think and Grow Rich, you have to become so intense with it. It has to happen no matter what, that you're willing to burn bridges and keep moving forward. So you have to clarify. It can't be something vague. He had that goal. It had to be a scholarship, a full scholarship. And, there are times in my life when you want something so badly and you have to focus on it. And it doesn't mean think about it once a month or once a year. It's got to be every day. So once you have that goal, then, that's like starting at home plate. Then when you get to first base, you have to think of it and, write it down. Writing, there's something powerful in writing your goal down or writing what you want. And so that would be the next thing, make sure it's written down so that you can see it, so you can feel it. And then you have to do that every day, but you also have to think about it. Like, for instance, when I decided to retire from teaching, I wanted to be a corporate trainer. So what I did was, in my imagination, every day I was going in to teach, I was pretending that I was walking into a conference hall or to a hotel meeting room. So I was doing my job of teaching kids, but in my mind, I was pretending that I was training, adults and training managers and supervisors and things like that. So you have to become the person you want to be in your imagination. And you have to, again, do that all the time, because that's how you become emotionalized to it. And once you get to that point, it's like you can't go backwards. You have to keep moving forwards.
So let me ask you this. While you were teaching, did any of the stuff you would have taught to adults actually bleed into what you were teaching to kids?
No, because I taught music. So no. And I would say I always had a very positive attitude with my children because I knew how important it was, to instill, the feeling of confidence in kids. So I always had that part of it, but no, not as far as what I was teaching now.
Because I'd be like, that would be great. Because if I would have got that when in high school, I'd be maybe further down the road. Um, so, so you went through that with your son. You started on this journey for yourself, just discovering the kind of like how to do, what to do to get your dream life. So, what were your next steps? How did you go about not only just creating this for other people, but for yourself?
Right. And so that was the tricky part because being an entrepreneur, being in business, it was great to have all the mindset, but then it was, how do I get that visibility? How do I get out there? And honestly, at that time, I did not want to use social media, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't understand it. And so that was kind of tricky. It was like, how do you do that? So I did mostly local businesses. I'd go and talk to businesses. I would join networking groups just to get, that knowledge of who I was and what I was doing. And then of course, COVID hit and I couldn't do that anymore. And so it forced me to get out of my comfort zone and to get into social media. But that's where I made some of I would say some mistakes, in that I would hear one person saying, well, go do this. And so I'd run over there and, do that. And then somebody'd say, no, you need to do this. So I'd run over there and do that. And I got really confused. So that's one thing I work with my clients on is, okay, let's build a nice foundation first, and then you can start to really scale. But let's have you doing the fundamental pieces that you need to do in order to be able to really build a successful business.
Wow. That is true. Because like a lot of times you'll hear, oh, well, you got to be on YouTube, you got to be on Facebook, you got to be over here, you got to do TikTok, you got to do Pinterest. And it's all great. They all work to a certain extent, but it also can be distracting.
Yes.
You pick one message, put it on one platform, have one product, and target one avatar. You can make enough money to live off just with that, right?
Right.
Many times we try to be, I like to call niching down. We try to be all things to all people, which means nobody wants to be a part of what you're doing. Because one is like, back before I got married, I was single and I'd go on dates and things, take girls out, and I'd be like, where do you want to go? Here, here, or here? And I started to realize quickly, I gave them 3 choices. They couldn't make up their mind. They gave them 2. They could. This is not anything against women. I'm just saying in general, if you give people 3 choices, confusion brings no choice. And what that means is if you give people 3 choices, they're not going to choose you at all. You give them 2 choices, they'll choose between the 2. It's just funny how people work. And so sometimes we hurt ourselves by making things cloudy, right? I think you said earlier, clarity is one of the most important things you can do. Not only do you have to be clear about your goals, but you got to be clear to the people you're speaking to, because if you're cloudy, they have goals they want to reach. And if it's not clear, they're going to be like, I don't need that.
Right. And I think the one thing that people tend to miss is how important their thinking is and their mindset, and really staying focused on their goal. Because when we get too involved in the mechanical part, the to-do list, and we forget to focus on where we're headed and where we're going and that vision we have for ourselves, that's when, things don't tend to work out for us. And then we wonder why. And so I think a lot of times too many people dismiss the mindset part of it and the mind shifts that you need to make in order to accomplish your goal, and think that it's all, like we talked earlier, on the outside. It's all on the things that you're doing. No, it's on the person you're becoming, because you can never outperform the image you hold of yourself. So that self-image is part of your inside world. It's part of the paradigms you have in your subconscious. And, as long as that's in control, which it will be in control unless you change it, then you're pretty much where you are today. And you can't really move forward.
So that's a good point. Your self-perception. I heard this from a preacher, and I really like it. He said, true humility is the correct perspective you have when you stand before God. And I think sometimes we have, even because we've had bad representation of God in our lives, a lot of times we have a false pretense of, because people think he's an old man with a stick in a cloud, right? Ready to make a mistake. It's not God at all. But how do you change, right, that self-image? Because maybe you did have a bad parent or two, or maybe you didn't have parents at all. And so that image wasn't created in you. And even if you did have good parents, they're doing the best they could. They only had limited information, maybe, and maybe they weren't loved. Maybe they weren't treated right. So they only gave you what they could. So how do you change that self-image, right? Because you're looking at the mirror, and maybe you see a slob, maybe you see someone who's overweight, maybe you see someone who's not good at articulating themselves. Maybe you find somebody, that's how you see yourself in the mirror, right? So how do you change that in the mirror? And how do you start fixing that?
Yeah, Chris, I'm really glad you brought up that point about parenting. Our self-image is pretty much formed by the time we're 6 or 7 years old. And it's not because we formed it. It's because of things we were told, feelings that we got, or, intuition that we had of who we were or who we are. And we pretty much continue that. And one of the things I think I found out when I was being a trainer was that teachers, the issues they have with students in their classroom are the same issues that managers and supervisors and owners have with their employees, because people don't really change, because they don't know how to change. So that becomes really important. So if our image is set by the time we're 6 or 7, and we didn't really do anything because we don't have a filter to decide, oh, is this who I think I am? We don't know that. Then it's up to us to decide who we are. And most of us never spend even an hour or two trying to figure out who we are and what we want. And I don't know if you ever saw the movie Runaway Bride, but I thought of this the other day. In Runaway Bride, this lady who was engaged multiple times but never married, she would just go with whatever her fiance liked. What kind of eggs did he like? What kind of activities did he like? And she just, went from one person to another, being like they were, instead of figuring out who she was. And it wasn't until she discovered herself that she was able to finally get married. And I think that's what we do. We just don't know who we are. And so we just tend to go with whatever the flow is. And so I think we really have to change that self-image. We have to spend time figuring out who we are and what do we really want. And then we have to look at, maybe you want to be the CEO of a company, and you start looking at, okay, what traits do I need to have in order to be the CEO? How do I need to, even hold myself, hold my body? How do I walk? How do I talk? How do I look as a CEO, on the outside? And then who do I need to become on the inside? What traits do I need in order to work with people? And so we have to start seeing ourselves as that person, because as long as we see ourselves as who we are today, you look around you. What you have today is a product of who you are today. But if you have a goal that's bigger than that, then you have to become somebody different, because the person you are today is not the person that needs to achieve that goal.
In the words of Einstein, he said, the level of thinking that got you in the problem can't be the level of thinking to get you out.
Exactly.
I also think about this is sometimes we're limited by, not so much anymore, but we're limited by the people around us. Because a lot of times what you see around you is what you become, right?
Right.
The good thing is we have this thing called the internet now. And so you can go see a Gary Vaynerchuk. You can go see a Tony Robbins. You can go see a Bob Proctor, even though he's passed. You can still see him. You can see a Jim Rohn. You can see a Earl Nightingale. You can see all these people. And my thought is that the more you hear what they say, the more you're going to change, because people don't know how to change. And you're starting to hit on it. But I think about this old story, right? About this king who had a hunchback son, and he was the prince, and he did everything right that he could. He just had a hunchback. And his dad said to him, son, I can get you anything you want. What do you want? He says, I want the best sculptors in the world to build a statue of me upright. His dad's like, why? Just put it out fully grown. I'm not fully grown yet, but I want it as if I'm fully grown. Once you put it out, my hands on my hips, like I'm king after you go. May you reign for a long time, Dad, but after you go, when I take over, I want it out in the field, out by itself, way beyond, just by itself. Mess with it. It's just there. I can go walk and visit it. So every night, right about dusk, the prince would disappear. No one knew where he go. And the king sent one of his servants to follow him one day, because this happened all the time.
Okay.
And he would take and put his arms through the image and pull himself upright every day. And he screamed. And so, the servant that went to follow him pulls out his sword like he's trying to save the prince, finds out what the prince is doing. He starts to weep. He goes back and tells the king, and he says, King, your son's trying to become the image that you created of him. But that's true. We really have to conform ourselves to the image that we hold in our head. Because that's, in reality, is someone said this, and I'll let you do it, because you probably can say it better. The thing is you always lie to yourself. You lie, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do the other thing. Or you lie to yourself, yeah, you can do it. Go ahead. Go ahead and do it. Do it all. Yeah, enjoy yourself. Do it. Either way, you're lying to yourself, but it's which lie you're going to believe.
Right. Well, and there's a quote, if you tell yourself a lie long enough, you start to believe it. And, honestly, that's what my son did. He told himself a lie long enough that he was getting a scholarship until he believed it. And he believed it. Like, just going back to his story, after he did this, I had to figure out what he accomplished, and that was my journey. And then I started telling him and explaining to him what he had done, because if you don't know what you've done, you can't repeat it. And I wanted him to be able to repeat it. And so I would explain to him, and he said to me one time, he goes, Mom, he said, when I got that scholarship letter, there was never any doubt in my mind that it was anything but a full scholarship. Never any doubt, even though he knew. And, he knew the odds of, my son researched everything. He knew the odds of getting a full scholarship to play baseball were slim to none. But I never discouraged him. I let him believe his little fantasy, and he believed it. And, we have to be like that. And you can say that was, a child, believing in a fantasy. But that's what we need if we're going to accomplish our goals. We need to be like that child, just having so much belief, and forget what the odds are telling you or what somebody else is telling you is possible, because it doesn't matter. It's not, thank goodness he had the goal and not me, because I wouldn't have had it. But,
Captain, the ship's going down. The ship's going down.
So I was so grateful. But every time he went to practice, didn't matter what sport it was, his mindset was not on the practice. It was, I'm going to get a scholarship. Every game he played, whatever sport, I'm getting a scholarship. And that was all consuming in his mind. And that's what we have to be. If we're going to have that type of success, it has to be all consuming.
I remember, I want to say it was Dexter Yeager. I don't know if you ever heard that name. He was huge in a certain network marketing company.
Yes.
He said this: if your dream's big enough, the facts simply don't matter.
Right.
And that's really what your son did, right? He
did.
He had such a big dream. And one of the things that we get told as kids going into adulthood, as teenagers, even preteens now, we tell them, dream? Really? No, you can't do that. You're not supposed to dream. We take away one of the things that I don't like about the age we live in is there's no more wonderment. There's no more awe when it comes to Christmas time, right? It's all just, we need to bring the awe and wonder back, right? Because that's really what we need in life to really get us to the place of being able to manifest things. Because it's just drab and dry and mundane. It's gonna be the same thing over and over again, because that emotion of dryness and mundaneness is so rooted in there that we're just manifesting what we already have.
Exactly.
So how do you put wonder back in your life?
I think it's just dreaming. And, every goal starts out as a dream. So I think it's just, what is it that you want? And then just keep building that fantasy in your mind, because we have this imagination, which is beautiful. And here's the thing, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. So if you just close your eyes and you build the image of where you want to be headed and what you want to have in your life, then you start building that dream. And as you do that, you impact your subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is what reaches out to the universe, and things start to come into your life if you allow it. And there's the other thing, we have to be willing to allow the good to come into us.
So you started your journey. You started walking into school pretending you were in a boardroom or a conference room, talking to people. And then how did you go from the classroom to the boardroom?
So,
I mean, other than in your imagination, how did that start to manifest?
Yeah. So I started to research companies where I could work as a trainer, and started to realize I needed a video to send to them, and send a video. So I picked the one company. I sent to 3 different companies, picked the one I really wanted to work with. And so within about a few weeks, one company said, no, sorry, we're not interested in you. And I thought, okay. So it was a little bit of discouragement, but I just kept visualizing that. I continued to go into the school thinking I was a trainer. So then the second company contacted me and said, we don't have any openings, but resubmit your video in 6 months. So I kind of wrote that on my calendar, 6 months, submit the video again. And then a few months later, the company I actually wanted to work with, one day I received this phone call, and they were interested and wanted me to come out and get through their week of training. And they wanted to hire me to do the trainings and seminars and so on. So it was like, that was the one I really wanted to work with anyhow.
So I want you to share I want you to remember, I want you to go back, because this is important for people to feel. I want them to feel this. So I need you to share your feelings, that not only the day when you got the phone call, but the first day when you're able to walk out of the classroom and walk into their training. You said you had to go train for a week. That first day, I bet there was so much. I'll let you finish.
So much skepticism, because even though this is something I'd wanted to do, because I saw, so about 15 years prior to that, I'd gone to a conference, saw this person training and everything. And I thought, I'd like to do that. And I bet I could do it better than he's doing it. And so, but then when I was actually there, I was like, am I good enough? And I think that's what a lot of us go through. I can't tell you how many times I've been to conferences with other coaches, and the most common phrase I hear is, am I good enough? And I think that's something that's in a lot of us, can I do this? And so that was the first feeling I had, was, have I made a mistake? Should I have just stayed teaching? Am I able to do this? But I felt like I needed to make this transition from the education world to the business world. I needed to find out what business people needed. I needed to find out what, issues they had. So I felt like I had to make this transition before I started my own business. And so doing that was something I felt I needed for my own personal growth. And I remember, because I was working with Bob Proctor at that time, and he said, if you feel you need it, then you need it. And so, it was okay to do until I gathered that experience. But I was afraid, can I do this? And honestly, everything that could go wrong, the first training I did pretty much did. Like my equipment wasn't working right. And some people never came back after lunch. It just was kind of a disaster. And then my second training, I was like, okay, that didn't go well. How can I change this? And after that, I was fine.
Well, I think you ran into something anyone who tries to be an entrepreneur, this thing attacks them almost immediately. Well, they're either doing something towards becoming an entrepreneur or they started a business. They're doing something. It's called imposter syndrome, right? You felt like, oh, well, when you saw the guy do the training, I could do that. But then when you went to go do it, you're like, I feel like an imposter. I feel like I'm trying to do something I'm not. And I think that goes back to, watch this, back to your son's story. He never felt like the imposter because he had played out so many times in his mind that he was the baseball player. He was the student athlete. He was getting a scholarship. So there's no room because he bought into that so much. He became that persona.
He did.
So,
right.
One of the things I learned is, I remember I had a coach. I played baseball in high school. And he told me one day we're out practicing. He said, we're going to have practice tomorrow. I'm like, oh, again? I guess you're right. Practice makes perfect. He goes, no, that's not true. Perfect practice makes perfect. And I said, wow. And so sometimes we just need to practice this image, this video. We need to play that video in our head. We need to hear the people saying, oh, you did a great job at that, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you need to hear, whatever you need to feel, you need to make sure that's programmed in your mind. If you need to sit in front of the mirror and tell yourself, I love you, or you're beautiful, or you're handsome, or whatever the case may be, you need to do that. So what are the things that people can do to start, other than what I've mentioned, or maybe you can go deeper on them, to start making that turn so they don't feel like they're an imposter?
Well, I think what you're talking about, looking in the mirror and saying things. And one thing you can do is like use one eye and make a statement or affirmation looking in just like your right eye and then shift to your left eye and just go back and forth. And that's embedding that into your subconscious mind. So that's a great thing to do, those affirmations. I also think one of my favorite things, and so often people say, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. Same thing, go off and do this. You have to find what works for you. Because I remember Bob Proctor saying, you need to write your goal out 100 times a day. And so I would start doing that and my hand would start to hurt. And that's all I focus on. This makes my hand hurt. This, as I'm writing my goal, it's like, that doesn't work. But I know people that worked great for. But you have to find out what works best for you. For me, it's just writing my story, just writing the vision of where I'm going and what I want to do and what I want to do for my family and what I want to do for my community. And just writing that out. For some people, it's just sitting there and visualizing it. But you've got to do something and find what, various techniques that there are that work best for you. One thing I think people need to do is to study and to read things and to really delve into what things are saying. I remember being in this book club, and this was the last time I went to the book club. They were doing Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I'm like, yes, I know that book, pretty well. And I went there and the other people were pretty much bashing the book. Like, how can you think and grow rich? That doesn't even make sense. And then somebody says, I started reading it. I just couldn't get past the idea, of creating wealth. I'm like, what's wrong with you people? But as I was going into it, I was trying to explain to them, you can't read books like that from cover to cover. You have to study it. You have to go slowly through it. You have to look at what's behind the story. And, so it's a matter of studying things. And sometimes we just read things and just dismiss it. Whereas, you have to really study this information, because here's the thing. When you read something like that, you think you have it, and then it just goes right out of your mind. And you have to read it again and keep doing it over and over again till it really gets inside of you.
Well, one of the great things about writing, when you do write, is you hear it 3 times. You hear it as you're writing it. Mm-hmm. You hear it as you're saying it, and then you hear that voice in your head that's reading what you wrote. So that's why writing's so important, because the Bible says faith comes by hearing. And whether you believe in the Bible or not is not my problem. But that is a principle that works. Faith comes by hearing. How many of you heard you ain't never going to be nothing? You're never going to be nothing. You can't amount to anything. Those type of things, you've heard those things before. Money isn't everything. No, but it's up there with air.
Right. There's a powerful story, and the baseball player's mind isn't coming to my head at the moment, but he was he played in the World Series, and he went to, after his career in baseball, he went to prisons to speak. And so he was telling these prisoners that when he was a kid, he and his dad would play, catch in the backyard. And he said one day he overthrew his dad and he thought he'd be upset. And he goes, man, anybody can throw a ball like that's going to be in the major leagues someday. And he talks about, having batting practice. And one time the ball went through the neighbor's window and he thought he'd be in trouble. And he's like, anybody can hit a ball like that's going to play in the major leagues someday. And so at the end of his talk, he said, so, there was really nothing for me to do but to play in the major leagues. And so he was a catcher and, like I said, he was in the World Series. So after that, one of the inmates there came up to him and said, I had a dad kind of like yours. He told me I'd be no good and I'd end up in prison someday. He said, I kind of fulfilled his dream for me too. And that's really sad because, we have to be really careful what we say to other people, particularly our own children, which again is why I never discouraged my son. I let him believe his little fantasy, and so glad I did. But, we have to encourage people, not discourage. And, if you're an employer, if you're working with others, look for ways you can encourage people because there's enough discouragement out there. They don't need any more.
Yeah, they don't need help being discouraged. There's plenty of people who'll do it for you.
Yeah, and it's in their heads because they've grown up that way, and they've heard things their entire life. So it's already there.
So tell the people you went through this process. You've learned how to become a corporate trainer. So tell them exactly what you do and how you do it, a little bit more in depth than during the intro.
Yeah, so I work with people to help them to shift their thinking so that they can really get what it is that they want and really go through the changes that they need to make in who they are, build their confidence, because again, we need to become somebody different. And so we start with thinking bigger. You've got to create that bigger vision because if you don't have something to excite you, then why do you get out of bed in the morning? You have to get to the point where what you want to do is so exciting that you want to go through maybe some of the discouragements you're going to have to go through in order to accomplish it. So I help them to create that bigger vision of what it is they want. And then I help them to become that person they need to be. Because as I said, the person you are today is not the person you need to be to accomplish that big goal. Because if you were, you'd already have it. So we know that you're not the person you need to be. So who do you need to become? And start to build that confidence and to make them into that person. And so that's what I help people do to achieve their goals, to build the reality of what they really want, and to get them to realize that whether they're aware of it or not, the way they're living right now was their choice. And it may not, you might say, this isn't what I wanted. Well, no, probably not. But that's what you attracted. So everything that you've attracted so far is because it is what you wanted.
Wow. Well. You also have a book. Tell us a little bit about your book.
So I have a book that was basically my son's story called Your Dream Power. And that book just goes through, some of the discouragements, some of the things. So it's more of a, I'll say a book for like middle school age children. And, then I also have a program, one's called Amazing Me. And then which is basically how do we become that amazing person? What steps do we need to go through? And very similar to what I just said about, getting that bigger dream figuring out who we need to be, the person we need to become, becoming bigger than what we are. And, then I also have a program for businesses called Quantum Business Accelerator, which really helps them to move their business forward and to understand how to build that foundation as well as the mindset, because the mindset piece is so important.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And where can they find you?
I can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, Instagram, and, or they can just contact me directly.
Okay. And on all the socials, you just, Patricia Stempler?
Patricia Stepler. Some as you might see on Facebook, I'm Patty Stepler. So, yeah, but you can find me there.
Your website?
My website is creatingtopproducers.com.
I like the name of that. That's good. Good. I like all the names of all your stuff, but that one really caught me. So do you have a favorite quote you'd like to share?
I do have a quote. I have many quotes that I like, but this is one that I think really impacted me the first time I went to a training with Bob Proctor, and it made me stop and think about what I was really doing. And he says, most people tiptoe through life hoping to make it safely from birth to death. And when their heart stops beating, it's a mere formality. And when I heard him say that, I'm like, oh, that's not what I want. And I don't want that for other people either. I want, when your heart stops beating, it's like a glorious day because you have achieved what you really wanted in life.
Wow. Wow. Well, my name's Chris Collier, and Patricia, it's been my pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And once again, please like, share, subscribe, depending on what platform you're on. If you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell. And you guys have a great day, week, or month, depending on the next time I see you. All right. We're still on. This is something I do for everyone. Hello, my name's Chris Collier. I'm the host of Conquer with Chris. I had Patricia on the show, and man, what a wealth of knowledge. What a great asset to have. If you think about working with her, you should, because I can tell she's high quality. She wants to get you results you desire, and she can help you do that. So whether you like having fun, you'll have fun in the process, or you want all the information, she can get you that. Or if you just, you want that change, you really desire change and want to help other people, she can help you do that too. So just get with her and connect and see where the process goes. Thank you so much. So I'll give you a cut of that and send it to you.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
This is great. I enjoyed this.
Good. And